morning and welcome to The Point. It is Monday, May 31st, 2021. Thank you to those of you joining us on the GBN Grenada Broadcasting Network's Facebook page, the Grenada Broadcasting Network's YouTube channel, the website www.gbn.gd, GBN TV channel 7, 11 and 20. Good morning to the listeners of Classic 105.5, 105.9 and the folks joining us on Party Grenada and Go to Fet Facebook pages. Always a pleasure to have you. This morning, my virtual guest is coming all the way from the United States. He is an NYC Council candidate, a former aide to Prime Minister Tillman Thomas, Mr. Gerry Hopkins. Good morning, Mr. Hopkins. How you do, sir?
Pleasant good morning to you. I'm fine, thanks. Pleasant good morning to you and to all of your listeners and viewers.
Appreciate your appearance here this morning, sir. So it was about almost 2 weeks ago that I learned that you are running for a councilman in New York City, USA, and I thought this would be an opportunity for us to hear more from you and your plans. And first of all, why? Why did you decide that this was something that you wanted to pursue?
Why? Well, I am a community organizer. I am an advocate. I have been that pretty much all of my adult life in the U.S. Since I got there, I studied mass communications and political science. I obtained a Doctor of Jurisprudence degree, a law degree, and I've been working with various candidates, even managed campaigns, worked on the Obama campaign as a captain, and has done lots of work in terms of advocating for the needs, the concerns, and the cause for justice of Caribbean Americans and other colored folks especially, but all peoples in New York City who are looking to have fair treatment in local city politics. And so it was a natural progression for me. Essentially, the things that I've been doing as an advocate, volunteering my time, I would be doing as a councilman in a more formal way and eventually paid for. But what motivates me really is trying to bring solutions to problems that affect the everyday working class person in New York City. And something I've said to folks, I'm not looking for endorsements of the establishment organizations and the elected officials who have been in office for endless years. But what really matters to me is the support and the votes of other ordinary New Yorkers, especially in my 48th councilmanic district, who face the same problems I face on a daily basis and who have been looking for solutions to those problems that I have been advocating and addressing over the years in the various activities I've been doing in New York City, especially in Brooklyn. And so having their support and having their vote is enough of an endorsement for me. And that is what really matters at the end of the day, not what the establishment candidates may have to say.
What will be some of your duties, your roles and responsibilities as councilman if elected? Let me elaborate on that a bit. The City Council in New York City, it comprises of 51 districts and representatives for each district that comprise covering all the 5 boroughs. It's New York City has a population of in the vicinity of 8.4 million residents. And my district in the borough of Brooklyn has over 230,000 residents. The population of the district that I'm going to be representing in City Council is almost double, actually more than double the population of Grenada. The budget for New York City is actually in the billions. The constituents in my district is mixed. We have Caribbean American, a large number are Caribbean American, and you have Jewish, white, Asian, Hispanic, but a large segment of the population there is Caribbean American. So I'll be representing the concerns of lots who are immigrants. And just to go back on and just to give a comparative picture of this, Brooklyn has a population of 2.6 million. It's the highest population of all the 5 boroughs. We're followed by Queens, where you have 2.2 million, and then Manhattan with 1.6 million, the Bronx 1.3, and Staten Island 475,000. So Brooklyn has the largest population. My district comprised, for those who are listening who are in New York and may not be familiar with the boundaries or the areas that encompass the 48th Councilmanic District. I'm talking about Prospect, I'm talking about Lefferts Gardens, I'm talking about Southern Crown Heights, I'm talking about Flatbush. All of us folks who visit from the Caribbean, everybody knows Flatbush. Well, that's one of the areas I'm responsible for. Flatbush, Central and East Flatbush. Also Kensington, an area that's heavily populated by our sisters and brothers in the Jewish community, and others as well, of course, but especially those. I'm talking about, I mentioned Kensington, West Ditmas as well. So it's Southern Crown Heights, Flatbush, East Flatbush, Ditmas, Kensington, Prospect, the bordering Prospect Park, and Lefferts Gardens. I actually live in Lefferts Gardens. So it's a large area with a population in the vicinity of 230,000, with a lot of concerns, a lot of needs to be addressed. And I'm ready to address those. I have been addressing those as a community organizer and advocate in the community, doing various activities and initiatives, and I'll be continuing to do so in a more formal way in City Council as the representative of the people.
In Grenada, we call it campaigning. Not sure what it's called in the U.S., but what does your campaign look like in trying to get the support of the voters? And who will those voters be?
It's a lot of work, but just to break it down a bit, you have Democrats and you have Republicans. Generally, in Brooklyn elections, the Democrats tend to dominate. In this particular race, my district has more candidates than just about any other district. We have about 15 or so candidates, and everyone was vying to be the Democratic candidate. And I was numbered among them initially. And then strategically, I took a step back and said, listen, only one is going to go on to contest the election on November 2nd. The primary, by the way, is June 22nd. All of these candidates, the Democrats, and if they are Republicans, they'll be doing the same thing too, trying to be the candidate chosen by a particular party. Now, I'm a registered Democrat, but I decided to run as an independent candidate, a concerned Democrat running as an independent candidate. And I'm doing that for a couple of reasons. One, there are so many Democrats vying for one position. And eventually, after June 22nd, several of them are going to come back around and try to be an independent candidate after June 22nd. So I'm ahead of them. I'm declaring myself as the independent registered Democrat who is the candidate as an independent. And not only that, to be honest with you, all of the Democratic candidates seem to be all saying the same thing, essentially. And over the years, we haven't really seen real solutions from many of them. And to a great extent, many of our Democratic candidates have become a part of the problem and not a part of the solution. And so I wanted to distinguish myself from them as an independent, principled, registered Democrat who is trying to bring real solutions to the table and real solutions to the problem, representing the interests of ordinary folks.
There may be people who are watching wondering, how would your election, if elected as NYC councilman, how would that help Grenadians? How would that help us?
It will help in a lot of ways. First of all, I'm one who has always been an advocate for the connections that exist between the links between our folks in the diaspora and our folks back in the Caribbean. We always talk about remittances and how important that is. And the folks who have employment, who have healthcare, who are well enough to work and have been taken care of in New York City are the ones who are the breadwinners for many of the families back home who provide so much in terms of sustenance for families and so much to our GDP by way of remittances. And the things I'm going to be focused on in New York City, to a great extent, are day-to-day needs and concerns of our people. Housing is a big problem in New York City currently. And I'm the candidate who's advocating for housing for all. We are looking to have there's a problem with availability of affordable housing in New York right now. It's many candidates see it as the major problem. And the formula that they have been using to designate housing as affordable hasn't really been working for most Caribbean Americans and African Americans and Hispanics. The question has become affordable housing, but affordable for who? The brackets that they've come forward with, based on a formula that is not working, is pricing the housing, the rent is just exorbitant, too unaffordable for most of our people. And I'm advocating for a formula that would reflect the income level of Caribbean Americans, African Americans, Hispanics, and others who've lived in these neighborhoods that have been affected by gentrification. Now, many people are pointing the fingers at the white folks who are moving into the neighborhoods as a big part of the problem. And homelessness has increased remarkably in Brooklyn, especially in my district. And part of my solution to the problem is to fix the problem with housing by coming up with a new formula that would allow more affordable housing to be available, rent control regulations in place to ensure that the landlords and especially the developers, the greedy developers, do not impose on our people rents that are so unaffordable. And I'm not pointing the fingers at the folks who are coming in, they're mostly white, and many of whom are progressives, who marched with us in the Black Lives Movement marches and protests, and really stood up with us in forging and demanding changes to correct the wrongs of systemic racism. The problem really, I see them as victims as well, because they have been brought into these apartments that are overpriced. And they too have been penalized by having to pay very high rent. Many of them come in with maybe more inherited wealth than most African Americans and Caribbean Americans have, so they could afford it, but they're complaining too. So what I'm trying to do is to band together with them and together address the real source of the problem. And the problem is this: we have elected officials, many of whom look just like me, same complexion, speak my language, but what has been happening is that they give these tax credits and subsidies to these developers. And the tax credits, in return for that, these developers promise that they will have a certain number of apartments put aside in a bracket that's affordable to people who live in the community, who've lived there all their lives, generations upon generations. But in actuality, what is happening is these greedy developers working with some, not all, landlords, are not really providing the affordable housing that they are promising. And the elected officials whose campaigns have been financed by these developers, they are in collusion. It's corruption, really. That's what it is. And they are benefiting from what the proceeds that these developers and landlords are collecting from the high rent, which is pricing out the minorities who live in these neighborhoods. So that is why we need a new formula to determine what is affordable. And I'm advocating for such a formula that would take into consideration not just the median income, but in actuality, what folks are making and what they can afford on a case-by-case basis to ensure that folks are not being, really basically been priced out and rendered homeless. And it's happening to a lot of folks who just simply can't afford the higher rent. So our folks from Grenada, from Jamaica, from Guyana, from Trinidad, all over who are here, many of whom are suffering the consequences of gentrification in terms of that aspect of it, are going to benefit from some of the changes I'm going to bring forward in a way that would really pull together a larger segment of the community, not just folks who are considered low-income Blacks and Hispanics, but also folks who are coming into the community, white folks, progressive whites, who are also complaining, but folks are not really hearing their complaints. And I think if we come together, we would accomplish more in trying to bring about that change. Some of the other issues that on my platform, equal justice in law enforcement, that's a major issue. There's been a lot of cry for reforms to be made to end systemic racism. I am advocating for a concrete list of agenda items in terms of reforms, especially addressing the issue of, this whole idea of cops getting special immunity, qualified immunity when they commit crimes, when they violate the law, people's civil rights, and when they kill innocent civilians, unarmed civilians. Really, they should be held to a higher standard, and they should not be exempted, and taxpayers' money should not be used to cover the wrongs and the criminal activity that when cops break the law or violate the rights of citizens and the residents in New York City, regardless of the district or borough. So that is something that I'm going to be advocating for. Several changes need to be made. The chokehold that has been banned in some jurisdictions, we have to make sure that in New York City we enforce that, and that folks aren't treated like animals and to be hunted. Most cops we know are good, and they respect the law and they respect colored folks. But unfortunately, sadly, too many get away with wrongs, and the system hasn't really been protecting the rights and the interests of Caribbean Americans and other colored folks. And I'm advocating for justice in that respect with concrete proposals. As a matter of fact, I have 7 pieces of legislation that I've already drafted within the first 100 days of my being elected a city councilman that I intend to take to the floor of city council to rally and lobby and get my other colleagues to work with me to ensure that we pass those laws to bring about the changes that we need. Some of the other areas include healthcare for all. I want all Brooklyn residents, especially in mostly colored, low-income neighborhoods, they should be provided with more hospital beds and better care, not fewer beds and less care. And also, right now, for example, in Brooklyn, we have 2 hospital beds for every 1,000 residents. Manhattan has 6 hospital beds for every 1,000 residents. Yes, more hospitals have been opened in Manhattan, and hospitals have been closed in Brooklyn. Brooklyn happens to be the borough, including my district, with a large population of African Americans and Caribbean Americans, Hispanics, and other colored folks. So what we're seeing is more systemic racism, and it's happening right before our eyes. And our elected officials, mostly in city council, for example, there are 51 elected officials. The majority of them are African American and Hispanic. Yet our city passes laws every single year, in term after term, that is discriminating against colored people, just like the folks who represent them in city council. Something is definitely wrong, and it's like the tail is wagging the dog. And too many of our city officials are bossed and bought out by the establishment. And that is one of the reasons why I am not a candidate seeking the endorsement of any major, large established organization or elected official who's been there for generations. I'm seeking to represent the interests of the people and the concerns of the people. Senior care is another area that I'm really advocating for. A lot of our folks who worked so hard to make this city as successful as it is, Caribbean American, African American, Hispanic, and others as well, they are not seeing the benefits of the kind of services we have available for seniors in Brooklyn. We have, for example, something called daycare centers for seniors. You go into any of these daycare centers and you would see the majority of folks in there are non-Black. They don't look like me. They're not minorities, they're not Hispanics. They're mostly non-colored folks. And these services are paid for by taxpayers' money. And I would ensure that the information is available so that access would be had and that our folks know what's available for them and take advantage of these services that the city of New York and the state of New York is paying for. Two big areas in my district, parking and sanitation reforms, really needed. I would try to end the undue stress and to alleviate the unnecessary fines in the lives of taxpayers. If I could get folks to save some more money and not have to pay all these tickets that are indiscriminately and disproportionately given to folks in Black neighborhoods, Hispanic neighborhoods, where colored folks live, then they'll have more monies available to send home to benefit our people back home. And seriously, it's a serious problem. You go into several of our minority neighborhoods, and 3-4 days a week, you have to be moving your car back and forth, left to right, to avoid a ticket. You go into white neighborhoods. You go to Bensonhurst, you go to Bay Ridge, you go to Sheepshead Bay. You don't have it like that. You move your car once a week. Even right here in my district, in Kensington, there are parts where it's only 1 day a week you have to move your vehicle. And those are neighborhoods where you have people in a higher income bracket. They have to pay fewer tickets. But folks in the poor neighborhoods, who have very little to begin with in terms of income, in terms of savings, they have been ticketed more heavily. And the ticketing officers, the traffic officers who come through, they come by van loads. They drop them off by the van load to go through our neighborhoods and to find folks and to use very little in discretion and to disproportionately ticket our folks. This has to end. To begin with, we have to lessen the number of days that the parking rules are in effect in terms of they having to sanitation moving from side to side. That should be fewer, as in the white neighborhoods. And that is so. And guess what? These regulations have been enacted by folks who look just like me, who represent these very neighborhoods. What are they doing on the job? God knows. Is they're not really looking out for the interests of our people. Similar to that is the whole issue of traffic ticketing. I was speaking about sanitation, where you have the cleaning rules and so on, where you heavily you have tough rules in our area where you have to move from side to side like 3-4 days a week, back and forth. And sometimes you miss it, you don't move on time, you get a ticket. In addition to that, the traffic rules, especially with these new bus lanes, they have this red carpets that they put down on certain streets. Those bus lanes are mostly in Black neighborhoods, Hispanic neighborhoods. You see it on Nostrum, you see it in Pitkin, you see it on Utica, you see it on Flatbush. And they are affecting our small business owners in these neighborhoods because no longer can you park your car and pull up and go into a store and patronize that store. You park in a bus lane, you ticket it. The buses ticket you because they have cameras. The scores of police officers, parading the streets, ready to give tickets, they are there too. And then you have hidden cameras also giving you tickets unknown to you. You don't see that again in other neighborhoods that are mostly populated by our white sisters and brothers. This has to end, and it can be easily done with the appropriate laws that has to be passed. And these bus lanes, by the way, you really only need a bus lane within 100 yards of a bus stop and 100 yards after a bus stop. You really don't need a bus lane for an entire thoroughfare, passing through several blocks, using up the space that would otherwise be used for parking and regular traffic. What you need a bus lane for is to ensure that people can embark and disembark. And that happens at the bus stop. So 100 yards before and 100 yards after, nowhere else. It's just a nuisance, it's congestion, and this red carpets that they put down, every couple of months they have to replace it. And guess what? You would never see a minority person working on these projects. The contracts to lay out this carpet, this red carpet on our streets in central Brooklyn, including my district, are always done by non-minorities, non-colored folks. God knows where they're coming from, but we know they're not coming from my district or in my neighborhood, but they're the ones who the city is paying to do this with taxpayers' money. That has to end. We have to fix that problem. And also generally, in terms of small business programs, I would like to see more being done to assist small business owners, many of whom are Caribbean American. You may know that I've been an advocate for small business owners. I do a monthly after-work networking, Wednesday we call it, event where we bring established business owners, aspiring entrepreneurs, investors, community leaders, and concerned residents. We come together every month, once a month, and we share best practices. We find out who's doing what in the community, and we find ways and means to support each other. Is what our community, colored folks, have not been doing enough of. Is what Malcolm X asked us to do. Is what Martin Luther King has been asked us to do before he died, especially just before his life was taken away. And is what we have not been doing enough of. Our Jewish brothers and sisters, they're doing it. Our Asian brothers and sisters, they're doing it. Caribbean Americans have not been doing it. And that's why myself, a local community organizer and realtor, Edmund Sadio, who's also the chairman emeritus of the Caribbean American Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and a local community organizer and recording artist, registered nurse by the name of Cheryl Vincent. Together, we co-host that event, and I've been coordinating and facilitating that event for almost 6 years. In September, it will be 6 years since we've been doing this. This is one of the several initiatives that I've been doing for years, trying to make a difference in the lives of our community, the lives of our people, Caribbean Americans, folks who we depend on back home.
So, Mr. Hopkins, what do you think are your chances? How confident are you that you can come out victorious? You have, 14 other candidates going up against?
Well, to be honest with you, after June 22nd, several of them are going to step out of the race. One Democratic candidate would be chosen, and a couple would come back into the race and try to be an independent, as I am already declared. And I would have the advantage on those because I am an independent by choice, not by necessity. They would come back into the race because they want a second chance. I'm here because I am choosing to be an independent registered Democrat in the race. And I have wide support in the business community. I have wide support in the Caribbean American community. There are several, just to break it down, there are several Haitian candidates in this race. And a big block of the vote in this district happens to be Haitian. But with there being as many Haitian candidates, it's an advantage to me as someone who is non-Haitian. And besides that, I have a strong support base in the Haitian community and in the Haitian radio stations, media, and several surrogates in the community that are working with me because I've always worked very closely with the Haitian community. In 2007, by the way, I did enter the race, a special election that was held when Congresswoman Yvette Clarke was trying to get to Congress. This seat became available, and I was one of the. Again, there were 15 candidates. I was in that race, and I worked very closely with the Haitian community then, and I have that. And one of the things I said to my Haitian sisters and brothers, and that I reminded them of, and they really identified with that, is in 1802, you had a Haitian revolution that brought together folks from the various countries in the Caribbean. You had a Grenadian, Henry Christophe, who arrived in Haiti when he was 12. He fought alongside Dessalines, Toussaint, and Boukman from Jamaica. You had 3 different countries represented in the fight against the colonizers in 1802, and they were successful. They had no cell phone, they had no satellites, they had no emails, they had no telephones, but they were able to come together from different countries and win the struggle because they had a common purpose. We here in New York City, where we face the same problems on a daily basis, and we have an opportunity to come together and take advantage of the opportunities we have to make a difference for all of us. And that is what I've been forging ahead with, and that is why I work closely with not just Creole speaking and Haitians, but also my Hispanic brothers and sisters from Latin America and the Spanish-speaking Caribbean, and it can be done. If we can do it in the various struggles and initiatives and advocacy work that I've been doing before running for office, we can do it in a campaign as we are doing, and we can do it beyond a victory to make a difference for all of us. Just recently, I was a part of a housing protest. We call it a speak out and vigil. That was held last Saturday. and that was to protest. The governor of the state of New York is currently trying to close an hospital just outside my district. But many of my constituents benefit, including myself. I've been to that hospital twice in the past. It's called Kingsbrook Jewish Hospital. Many Grenadian Americans, Jamaican Americans, Guyanese Americans, Trinidadian and Trinbago Americans benefit from that hospital. That hospital has 200 plus beds, which we need desperately in a borough that only has 2 hospital beds for every 1,000 residents. We had to come together, and there was Spanish speaking, English speaking, white, Jewish. We all came together, and guess what? I was the only candidate from my district who was an organizer of that protest. Part of the committee called the Kingsbrook Community Action Committee. We were responsible for organizing that event. And there are going to be other events like that, because the governor is working with some developers who are trying to close that hospital. And eventually what they would like to do is use that real estate, that property, to build more unaffordable apartments that Black folks in the community cannot afford. They would like to close the hospital. They're saying that the care is going to move to Brookdale Hospital and Interfaith. With all due respect, those hospitals, yes, they can be improved, but those are 2 hospitals that have had been getting bad reports in terms of the standard of care, the level of care that people receive at those hospitals. And here they are saying that Black folks, Hispanic folks who live in this community must go to Brookdale and Interfaith, and they're going to close this Kingsbrook Jewish Hospital over time. They're doing it gradually, but we are seeing through the plan, and we know exactly what's happening, and that is why we are protesting. But it's issues like that over the years that I've been standing up for, to ensure that colored folks, and not just colored folks, because all folks benefit. And everything that I've done, I've worked with whites, many of whom are progressives, to try to get, at the end of the day, what's fair for all of us, what's just and what's right under the law here in New York City and in the state of New York.
Let's take a break, Mr. Hopkins, and then we're going to come back and continue the discussion. We're speaking with a New York City Councilman candidate, Mr. Gerry Hopkins. We'll be right back.
Do you hear what I hear? Listen to the ocean, and you will hear a cry for help. The ocean is hurting, and we are the source of the hurt. But we can stop and start to heal our ocean by preventing pollution from getting into our waterways. It can start with you. Join an active organization, or better yet, make a personal commitment. Commit not for just one day in the year, but for the rest of your life. Let's dispose of our plastic and other waste responsibly, and let's start building resilience. Let the healing begin.
This message is brought to you by the OECS Commission with funding from the Government of Norway. REMLIT, tackling ocean pollution from turf to surf.
You know, one day I woke up and, they painted a set of pedestrian crossing all along the streets. Nobody told us how to use that thing properly.
I know how.
You're serious?
Every safe, good driver knows about these things. As a driver, you have to be very attentive. You know you're coming up close to a pedestrian cross, you start slowing down immediately, looking to see if there's any pedestrian on the side getting ready to cross. If there is, you stop on the line that is a certain distance before the crosswalk. Then you would see the pedestrian put their hands out, looking directly at you, indicating that they are going to cross. And only when you have come to a complete stop, that is when they will quickly and safely cross to the other side. And then you continue happily on your journey.
Stop, look, hand out, eye contact, wait for pedestrian to cross. Then you happily continue on your journey.
This message is brought to you by this group of insurance companies, the Traffic Advisory Body, and the Traffic Department.
One day I woke up and, they painted a set of pedestrian crossing all all along the streets. You know, nobody told us how to use that thing properly.
I know how.
You're serious?
Every safe, good driver knows about these things. As a driver, you have to be very attentive. You know you're coming up close to a pedestrian cross, you start slowing down immediately, looking to see if there's any pedestrian on the side getting ready to cross. If there is, you stop on the line that is a certain distance before the crosswalk. Then you would see the pedestrian put their hands out, looking directly at you, indicating that they are going to cross. And only when you have come to a complete stop, that is when they will quickly and safely cross to the other side. And then you continue happily on your journey.
Stop. Look. Hand out. Eye contact. Wait for pedestrian to cross. Then you happily continue on your journey. This message is brought to you by this group of insurance companies, the Traffic Advisory Body, and the Traffic Department.
Welcome back to the Point, speaking with New York City Councilman candidate Mr. Gerry Hopkins, a Grenadian son of the soil. Let us, at this point in the program, open the phone lines and the other social media platforms for those of you who may have comments, questions, queries, concerns for Mr. Hopkins. This is your chance to ask them. The landline number 435-2041. The WhatsApp number is also 435-2041. Please, only written messages on WhatsApp, and you can continue to post your comments, questions, queries, concerns on the GBN Grenada Broadcasting Network's Facebook page and the Grenada Broadcasting Network's YouTube channel. So let me go to a comment on Facebook. Somebody on Facebook is asking, we know Brooklyn has been populated with West Indians, in which we generate millions into the economy, but yet we feel we are not being heard or given the respect we deserve, especially where we've been seeing a change in the pardon, where in our community that Jews been buying up all the buildings and hiking up the rent, and more white people being moved into the 90s where they are staying away from because of the crime rate. The question, can you tell me how you would address these issues plus the victimization of our youths by the police?
And that's exactly what I was talking about. The issue is, the reason why that's happening is because the developers and the landlords, especially the developers, have been given special tax credits and subsidized arrangements are being made by our elected officials, city and state, for these developers to move in and with the promise that they are going to deliver affordable housing for everyone in the community. But in actuality, what's happening is the housing that's been made available is too pricey. It's unaffordable for our folks who live and work in those neighborhoods. And the formula that they're using to determine these allowed housing arrangements is just not fair. It's not working out to our advantage. And that is why I'm proposing a different formula that would take into consideration the actual income of our folks in every given neighborhood, and do things on a case-by-case basis, so that you do not have, and besides that unfair equation formula that they are using, there's also an issue with the city officials are not monitoring what the developers are doing. So the promises that they are making are not being delivered. The number of apartments that they're saying in each new building is going to be made available for low-income families. It's really not been offered, and no one is watching over what's been done, and so it's unfair to our local residents, and none of our elected officials are really monitoring and implementing and enforcing the law, making sure that the various agencies are enforcing the law and the regulations that are in place. So that is something that I'm going to try to pass new legislation to correct that problem. And like I said before, these higher prices that are being imposed on folks is also something that is unfair. Many of the new folks who are moving in, mostly whites, many of whom are progressives, they're complaining too, but they're not complaining to us. But I'm engaging them and getting them to join with me to bring about a solution to the problem. And we would be heard when we do it that way, better heard than if we are just doing it by ourselves. So it's a matter of strategy and approach to how we solve the problem. And that is one of the things that I'm taking very seriously, because I know folks who become homeless as a result of this. And we have to fix that problem. With respect to crime, the crime rate, that is something that I have an approach to that, first of all, I've been writing about the problem in Caribbean Life and Caribbean Times newspaper. I've been talking about it on radio in the various radio shows that I've appeared on WPAT 9:30 AM, WVIP 93.5 FM, and other alternative stations. I have been doing that, but I have an approach that I haven't seen anyone really talking about anything similar to what I'm advocating for. I have a two-pronged approach to addressing the issue with gun violence in New York City, and especially in my district. We need to control access to guns in order to accomplish the disenablement of gun violence. I am looking at the problem in a different way. A lot of folks tend to say things like, well, guns don't kill people, people kill people. But the fact is, without access to guns, the guns by themselves will not kill people. People who have access to guns are doing the killing. And in many of the cases, what's happening, you have folks with mental issues, you have folks who have no need for a gun. The criteria has to be revised. There are changes that I'm going to push for to ensure that folks who end up with guns really deserve to have a gun. For one, we must find meaningful ways to control the access to guns by having tougher criteria for gun ownership. We need to have certified training should be required for anyone who wants to own a gun, how to use a gun, how to safely store a gun, and how to basically whether, if you have a gun, you should know how to store it and how to use it. And you should have certified training for that and pass a test before you could own a gun. Also, we need to make sure that the mental health and criminal history of pulled are fully checked. There are federal initiatives that have been passed in the past, but which the Republicans have pushed back on. The Biden administration is pushing for that, but all politics is local. And if our local officials in City Council can work together with the state representatives in Albany, I'm sure the congressional representatives and senators will listen and pay more attention. For one, city officials like myself, if and when I'm elected, can apply pressure to congressional representatives to ensure and get folks to rally and to demand the changes that we need in Washington. So it's not enough just to do it locally. We have to get federal engagement, and some of these laws that we need must be uniform and national. And some of the things I'm pushing for example, I think we need a 2-week waiting period after all of the above requirements that I've mentioned have been met. I'm talking about the training. I'm talking about having a license to own a gun, and you have to take a test, just like you need a driver's license exam. You need a license before you could own a gun. I think it shouldn't be as accessible as it is currently. And I think there should be the establishment of a national data bank of records of all national gun owners, especially including those who have been disqualified as applicants and those who have committed violent crimes using guns. Their names should be in a data bank, and so that you cannot commit a crime or lose gun ownership in one state and go to another state and own a gun. For example, something that is happening currently, folks are purchasing guns in the South, in states like Georgia, where you have very liberal gun ownership rules. You can pretty much just walk into a store and buy a gun there. In New York, it's more difficult to obtain a gun. The criteria is already pretty strict in New York. However, folks go out of state, especially in the southern states, obtain guns and bring them to New York and commit crimes with those guns. Then there are also guns owned by people who legally own these guns, but they do not store the guns properly. They're very insecure. Their children obtain these guns and commit crimes. They hurt themselves, they hurt others, or people go into their homes and break into their homes and easily obtain these guns, and then they get used on the streets. We need to ensure that there's better gun safety and storage rules in place and fewer guns on the street, period. And until we do that, the problem is going to continue to increase. Something that regarding the results we would see when we limit access to guns. For one, there'll be fewer guns being carried across state lines. Two, there will be fewer guns in our city streets, in our poor Black and white and Hispanic neighborhoods. And there will be fewer incidents involving gang members in Black and Hispanic neighborhoods, as well as fewer shootings, mass shootings in U.S. schools and malls. The fact is, again, like I said before, guns don't kill people by themselves. People use these guns to kill people, but if they do not have the guns to commit these mass shootings, it will not be happening. The crime rate in New York currently, you'll be amazed. I mean, right now, in the month of March, for example, there were 34 murders, homicides. In March 2020, there were only 25. We had an increase in 1 year of 36% in the number of homicides, cases involving murder where guns were used. In terms of shootings, there were 99 shootings in the month of March, the most recent statistics we have here of this year. In March last year, there were only 56. There was an increase of 43 shootings using guns here in New York City. There was an increase of 76.8%. Of course, various factors are influencing the increase in crime. However, the fact is the access to guns. We need to do something about that. The gun control laws cannot just be in New York. It has to be uniform across the U.S. So our local elected officials like myself, when I become elected, we need to apply the pressure locally. All politics is local. Applied locally, get our colleagues who represent us in Albany, in the state assembly and Senate, and get our colleagues in Washington, in the congressional representatives I'm talking about, as well as our senators, to seriously take this up and do something. And we have to appeal not just to Democrats. We have to appeal to the Republicans as well, because they are the ones who are really holding us up.
Okay.
So our president has to push, and our people have to push together.
So let me go to another question. Somebody asks, if you don't want endorsements from any politicians that came before, where are you planning to get money for your campaign?
Well, first of all, the money don't come from the politicians. So this person, they kind of have it wrong there. The money is not coming from the politicians who are elected. The money is coming from Obama, for example, when he ran. It was the ordinary voters who gave $5 and $10 and $20 who financed his campaign. It wasn't the big donors. So you don't have to be in bed with the developers and the elected officials who run the town and who run the Democratic Party in order to accumulate funds to win a campaign. And it's not just money that wins a campaign. Yes, you need that to advertise, but if you run a good grassroots campaign and you're well connected with the local community organizations, as I am, and with the clergy, the churches, the small grassroots organizations, and business leaders, as I am, I know it can be done. So it's not about how much money you have collected. It's how genuine you are about bringing solutions to the problems and having an agenda that's viable, that's realistic, and connected with the folks who are complaining and who need change. So that is what I intend to do. And like I said before, as long as I am doing what is appreciated and what the folks who face the same problems that I face are demanding in terms of changes, and I have an agenda for change that is realistic and viable, that they can see, I know we can do it.
Let me go to a caller. Good morning, caller.
Good morning, Blossom, and good morning to our guests. Now, the question I have for the gentleman is how you intend to address and what kind of contribution you intend to make when it comes to the embargo that America has on Cuba. I want to hear what, if you think it's time that it should be lifted, and what kind of contribution are you prepared to make in that regard? Thank you.
Thank you, caller. Stopkin.
Good question. No, issues regarding foreign affairs and trade is federal jurisdiction. Or representatives in Congress and the Senate and the White House, they're the ones who handle those matters. However, I am not going to be one who would sit back and say, oh, we should just leave it to Congress or leave it to the White House to do it. Again, I'm a community organizer, I'm an advocate, and I'm an activist. And I'm going to continue to be that in City Council. And so I respect all peoples and all nations and the sovereignty of every nation. And yes, we have age-old gripes, some, especially Republicans and some Democrats too, with the Cuban people. But the Cuban people have done nothing worse than anyone else that we have friendly relations with. As a matter of fact, the Cuban people have not really done anything to the U.S. And Obama tried to move and advance, regularizing relations between Cuba and the USA, and the Trump administration tried to roll that back. I am hoping that the Biden administration will do the right thing and take us back at least to where Obama had gotten us and move beyond that. And I would be one who would insist and would lobby and would organize, not just speak to my colleagues in Albany and in Washington, D.C., to get them all to come together to make that plea. I would get my Hispanic, my Latino friends, those who are concerned about the plight of the Cuban people, the need to lift this embargo. It's a human rights issue. It's not about politics. You need medications, you need other supplies, you need trade. Folks want to travel, tourism, back and forth. We need to open up the borders and we need to lift the embargo. It is heartless. It is unconscionable. And for those who claim to be Christian and God-fearing and who promote such an agenda, I think it is uncalled for, and we have to do something about that. And I will be doing my utmost to ensure that we organize and make our demands for the regularization of trade and engagement between the Cuban people and people to people, government to government. We need to regularize the relationship that we have with the Cuban people. And Cuba has done so much for the Caribbean and Caribbean Americans. And those of us who are here as Caribbean Americans, we have an obligation to ensure that this is done, because our relatives back in the Caribbean get free medical care, get assistance in agriculture, in science, in medicine, in dentistry. I mean, the Cuban folks have helped the entire Caribbean and Latin America. So the least we can do is ensure that diplomatic ties are regularized between the U.S. and Cuba.
As we wrap, a question on WhatsApp, or more statement. Somebody on WhatsApp says you should return to Grenada and run for Prime Minister, especially at this time. So let me add to it and ask, do you have any plans to return to Grenada and serve in a capacity maybe similar to that of NYC councilman?
That is a question to be answered later. Right now, the focus is New York City Council. I am rallying the support of Grenadian Americans, my Trinbago friends, my Guyanese friends, my Jamaican friends, by the way, whom I work with very closely here in New York City, my Haitian friends, my Latino and Latina friends. And we have to do this for us and for those who came before us. If elected, I will be the first Grenadian-born Grenadian American elected in City Council. We have Jumani Williams, who was there in City Council before me, but his parents are from Grenada, but he was born here. I will be the first Grenadian-born elected official in City Council if elected. So that will be history there. But it's not for that. It is for what I stand for, and it is what I'm trying to accomplish for all of us. My tagline, my mantra is, together we are strongest, not stronger. together we are strongest. So I'm trying to get all Caribbean Americans, all colored folks, all progressives, whites, black, Hispanic, Latino, all of us together to forge ahead and to bring about the changes that we need to uplift our community and to make life better for all of us, not just for some of us. As it is right now, there's a lot to be addressed, a lot to be done. And I just wanted to mention, in terms of my background, you mentioned that I was aide to a prime minister, former Prime Minister Tillman Thomas. But this is not about Caribbean politics. This is about representing the interests of all of our people here in New York. I'm an author. I authored a book when I was 16. I became the youngest Grenadian to write a book. It was a book entitled Grenada Toppers the Balance, a day-to-day account of the events that culminated with the U.S. military intervention in Grenada in 1983. It was a student's perspective on what transpired then. It was right after I had graduated from school at age 16 that I wrote that book. It was published and distributed in Grenada, Trinidad, and elsewhere. And it's out of print, and it's been a revised version of it is forthcoming. But in addition to that, I co-founded and host what the event I mentioned, After Work Networking Wednesdays. I worked as a high school teacher and certified mediation specialist with the New York City Department of Education for 6 years. I was also a union rep and delegate with the UFT. So I'm also a union man here in New York City. I also function as a journalist and columnist, writing for print and online outlets and hosting radio shows in New York City at WPAT 9:30 a.m. and WVIP 93.5 FM. And also I did the same for a while in Grenada at GTC FM. Also, I co-founded and co-direct the operations of several not-for-profit organizations, including CARE, Concerned Americans for Racial Equality here in the U.S., and the New American Chamber of Commerce. I've done some work with them. I also co-founded and coordinated and organized an advocacy organization called the Urban Nightlife Association, which was later renamed the New York Restaurant and Nightlife Association, which brought together establishment owners in the nightlife industry when they were being attacked, you may say, and harassed by NYPD. We stood up. We got people like Norman Segal, the civil rights attorney, who I engaged, and others to stand up with the nightlife establishment owners to lift and improve compliance in terms of the state liquor authority rules and guidelines, and also to stand up and to file lawsuits when harassed against the city, to push back on the discrimination, the disproportionate kind of discrimination that they were being attacked with. I've also been a very active member of the Caribbean American Chamber of Commerce and Industry and other activities. I know we're running out of time that I've done that has prepared me for this job that I've offered myself up for here. Those who would like to find out more about my background and what my agenda is may go to Hopkins for City Council on Facebook, Hopkins for City Council, and check it out. Or they can give me a call, 347-350-4285. 347-350-4285.
Ms. Hopkins, thank you very much for being our guest this morning, and I wish you good luck in your endeavors. The vote is on June 22nd, you said?
No, June 22nd is the primary. I'm not contesting the primary because I'm an independent. My date is November 2nd.
Okay.
Tuesday, November 2nd. That is the general election. So all of what I'm doing now is preparing for that date. So anyone who would like to volunteer or donate or be a part of this movement for change. Together we are strongest. Join me, Hopkins for City Council. And together we can make this happen. Together we are strongest.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Hopkins. I wish you all the best and enjoy the rest of your day. Continue to stay safe.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Pleasure was mine.
That was Mr. Gerry Hopkins, JD. He is an NYC councilman candidate. We thank him so very much and wish him all the best in his endeavors. Those of you who are in the U.S. and would like to reach out to him, Hopkins for City Councilman. That's a Facebook page, and you can surely lend your support if that's what you desire to do. That's the end of my time today. Joseph is up next with Mid-Morning Buzz. Have yourselves a blessed Monday. I'll be back tomorrow morning, God willing.